Hello and welcome to this, the 142nd episode of Old Romans Unscripted. As always, we appreciate your viewing, but also your interjections. So please, in the comments, do say hi. Tell us where you're viewing from. It's always interesting to know. And please feel free at any time during the show to ask questions or to comment with your own observations, and we will do our best to answer or share those as the show progresses. So welcome to Faithful Anne there in Ireland. God bless you, Anne. Always good to see you. And I'm sure some of our other regular viewers will chip in with their greetings too. Now, an interesting discussion, I think, today, following on from last week's discussion on the conclave, or rather the consistory. Last weekend. Now, following the consistory, there were some interesting remarks made by both Pope Francis and one of the newly created cardinals, but head of the dicastery for worship and the sacraments, one Archbishop Cardinal, now Archbishop Arthur Roche, formerly Archbishop of Leeds in the UK. But before we get into that, let's bring on someone waiting in the green room. Brother Stanislaus, greetings. Oh, we can't hear you. Well, I can't hear you. Oh, hold on. Oh, can you unmute yourself? Speak now. No, still can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Okay, well, interject when you can. Meanwhile, greetings from Peggy. Hello, Peggy, from East Tennessee. Lovely to see you as always. Do, folks, while we wait for Brother Stanislaus to address his technical difficulties, do feel free to greet us. As you say, tonight's or today's discussion is following on from that we had last week about the consistory, comments made afterwards by Pope Francis in the week and Cardinal Roche about we who, according to them, are backwardists. Hence the title of today's show, Regressio. Brother Stanislaus, can you try again? No? Still can't hear you. You might have to come all the way out and all the way back in again. Okay. So we'll let Brother find his voice. And the trouble is, I don't want to get... I know last week I gave quite a long introduction as we waited for our panelists, but I don't want to preempt, as it were, the discussion too soon. Bishop Kelly also should be joining us. So we'll just wait a couple of moments for them. I suppose we haven't asked the question for a while, but if you'd like to play a quiz, what is tomorrow in the liturgical calendar, meaning the traditional liturgical calendar? Fingers on buzzers or comment or answers in comments, if you'd be so kind. What is the liturgical office for tomorrow? So I'll leave you to wonder and ponder about that. Okay, Brother Stanislaus is coming back now. Let's add him to the stream. Oh, that's better. Yeah, we've got down now.
Can you tell? Does it work better? Can you hear
Oh,
me?
yeah. Yes,
Okay.
no problem.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Yes, thank you, Excellency. How are you?
I'm not too bad, not too bad. How's your week been?
It's been all right. I'm sure, like you, it's strange that I don't know if anybody else experiences this. I figure I might as well mention it. But it seems like when we have the warmest, clearest weather is when I have trouble with my connection.
Huh.
And I would think that would be when it would be the best. But I kind of knew that when I was out with the dog earlier, and I thought, oh, look at that. It's very hot. We're having extreme heat this weekend, but it's very clear. And I thought, well, we're going to have problems. And sure enough, so far, we've had a few problems, but at least I'm able on right now. Other than that, we're in that sort of slow time of summer. And for those of us that not being a part of a parish, I forget how slow things start. Things really, especially this time, at least in this country, where this weekend, this Labor Day weekend, and everybody, in a sense, everybody, this is the last vacation before school, catechism, everything starts to get going again. And I was thinking about that this week as you asked, because it was kind of eerily quiet this week. But at the same time, I realized it was very hot. It's the doldrums of summer. And I don't know if it's going to get any louder in a sense, but things will pick up because it's just the way it is. We're getting to election season, to school season, to everything starting up again, like I was saying. So.
Yeah, indeed. It's been one of those weeks for me with various sort of surprises, not unpleasant, but but sort of last minute changes to one's schedule and things.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those that I don't like changes to schedule. So that might have been a big thing for me. Had it, it reminds me of, because I think, I think people maybe don't realize how stretched out we are. And, we really don't have, it's not like any of us can reach to a community that's there, of where there's always people, there's always something going on. Wherever we are, we're small. And so that means there's, if it's just me, if it's just you, if we have an appointment, then we're busy. That means that when someone calls, there's a busy signal, there's the emails don't get answered and all that. So what I mean by that is that, in a parish setting, there's always somebody, you can call. You may not get the person that you want, but you'll get someone to maybe kind of help you along with whatever you're looking for. With us, it's kind of like what I've kind of reflected on during the week. It does kind of feel like being alone, but you're not. You're not alone. And it's very much where your faith has to play a not just an integral part of it, but your faith has to be so strong and so rock solid that you have to be able to withstand the storms by yourself. It's not ideal. And I certainly would not want anybody to have to do that. But what I was thinking about was well, I wonder how the Archbishop is withstanding whatever is coming his way this week, or Bishop Kelly, or whoever else who is out there. Or I think of Deacon Adam in Slovakia, preparing as I am, what's coming his way. And I realized that in many ways we're all feeling the same thing, just in our own separate, if I can say just for the moment, aloneness. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because one of the things that your show notes showed was about a lot of things that came out of the Vatican this week, because some of the things that some of the newly appointed cardinals had said, and kind of speaking more to that of what our role is. And And I just kind of, I was just kind of reading through the notes this morning. And since you asked that, and I was thinking about it, I thought, well, is that the way we term it? Do we have a role? And as I was kind of getting ready for the show, I thought, well, how do you prepare, or how do you defend what is always true? How do you have a role for the truth? How do you have a role for what is? That's a very hard concept for me, because I know what you mean. And I know it's a lot of what our viewers and those who listen to these things are asking, because this is also the weekend where many of the Latin masses, they're gone from a lot of the churches, or they're being shepherded out to the small, obscure little chapels out to the country. And so a lot's going to change as people are coming back. They're going to start saying, where's my Latin Mass that was here every Sunday? And what do we say? I mean, because we have to have an answer as well. I mean, I don't think that it can always be, well, just come here, we have what you're looking for. I mean, there has to be an answer, and that's where I kind of am at maybe a bit of a loggerheads in your question, because it just become to me, well, as old Romans, we simply are what is there, what is the truth. I get that some people don't get it. I get that there's people who don't buy it. I'm looking at the Holy Father, at Cardinal Roche, some of the things they said, we think, what is going on here, except what we've been saying is going on, and what so many said before us for so many centuries now have been going on. But our role, how do we take on that role? And that's where I have trouble, because I'm saying, well, this is just me. Is there a role to take? How do you take on the truth when the faith is the truth? Do you get where I'm going? You see where I?
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll cue the viewers in on the question that I was asking in our show notes in a moment, but probably some have already got the gist of it. But the landscape of the traditional Latin Mass and its availability, as you say, that changes for many people this weekend. I was watching an EWTN report yesterday about a Latin Mass parish that as of this weekend, there is now no more Latin Mass, and this is a conventional diocesan parish in Washington D.C. That was also offered the Novus Ordo, and in fact was offering the Novus Ordo. The parish priest realized that something wasn't working, so he introduced the Latin Mass. Numbers began rising, people began coming, families began coming, and it totally changed the parish, rejuvenated the parish, and now, of course, read the interview with EWTN. They were lamenting the new situation where they can no longer, Father can no longer say the traditional Latin Mass. And there were families and parents of families interviewed saying, well, we don't know what we're going to do. Now, there is a small, tiny little red brick chapel about 2 hours drive away that will be offering the traditional Latin Mass. But as one father of a family, it seemed like 6 or 7 children, said, well, we fill one pew in this parish. In that tiny chapel, there's not going to be space for us, and we're only one family. We're only one traditional Catholic family. So how is this going to work? And I think there's, even though, I mean, they came out with an interesting statistic. They said something like 150,000 American Catholics attend the traditional Latin Mass, which they reckoned was about 1% of the Catholic population in America. But it's interesting because you hear a statistic like that and you think, well, that doesn't sound very many. But then you visit a location like that and you realize, well, actually, that's a pretty significant impact on the lives of the Catholics in that place. And of course, the same is true dotted around the country for various other places as well. And I was indeed talking with Deacon Adam in Slovakia yesterday, and he was telling me he'd visited a priest friend of his. They were in seminary together, but this chap continued and was ordained to the Novus Ordo, but he has an affection and an understanding for tradition, and was saying the traditional Latin Mass, and Deacon Adam asked him, what are you going to do now? What does this mean for you now? And he said, well, it means I can't say it. He says, all my masses are public, because he's a parochial priest. All my masses are public, and I'm not allowed to offer the traditional Latin Mass publicly. And there's no point. There's no point asking the bishop to ask Rome for permission, because it's not likely to be granted. So that's it. So now, for him, in his parish, no more traditional Latin Mass. And for him, no traditional Latin Mass. And I don't think necessarily people are realizing, or they're going to begin to realize now, the actual impact of Traditionis Custodes as it becomes enforced. And I was wondering, actually, I haven't looked into it yet, but I was wondering, what does this mean for, say, traditional Benedictine monasteries? Are they going to be allowed to continue, because they weren't under any kind of Ecclesia Dei situation? I mean, they have an autonomy as abbeys, but does that stretch to the liturgy? Will they be, will places like Fongombo and Labaro and all these other bastions of tradition, will they be able to continue? Will the monks be able to continue to pray the old urinal and sing the Gregorian chant and have the traditional Mass? It's, the things are going to become really quite serious. And the question, that we're asking today, I mean, I hope we've got an answer. But the question certainly for priests like the chap in Slovakia and others and faithful everywhere is, with the crackdown on the traditional Latin Mass and on the lessening of its availability, what are they going to do? Because, clearly, I mean, we are, despite what Francis and Roche say, we are going backwards. We're going back to the 70s. We're going back to the prohibition of the Mass. And, what are people going to do? What are they going to be prepared to do? So let's begin with this quote. So this is from Pope Francis. He was addressing a conference on liturgy. And he says, and finally, the Pope insisted the progress in the understanding of the liturgy and the art of celebrating it, quote, must always be rooted in tradition. At the same time, he warned of a worldly spirit of going backward. In Italian, he used the word indietrismo, literally backwardness. Going back to the roots, he said, does not mean going backward, but instead means allowing true tradition to lead one forward. He cautioned liturgists to carefully distinguish between tradition and traditionalism. warning that today the temptation is backwardness disguised as tradition. Now, I think he's got a nerve because backwardness is exactly what he's doing by returning the church to a state of play 50 years ago in the 70s, where the traditional Latin Mass was banned. But also, again, it's what his understanding of tradition. And I think this is the problem with both him and Roche, and clearly then it must be with others. That definition or understanding of tradition is completely skewed, because if what he said were true, then he would know himself that the Novus Ordo Missae is a complete break with the root and the tradition that went before. But of course, he doesn't see that. But he and Roche, they want to present things that way. Now, Roche, for example, he says that reform to Catholic worship since the Council is taking place, but it's a slow process because there are those who are dragging their feet with regard to this, and not only dragging their feet, but stubbornly opposing what the Church has actually decreed. That's a very serious matter. In the end, people have to ask themselves, am I really a Catholic, or am I more of a Protestant? And then here he says, regarding those who argue that the reforms rolled out by Paul VI and Pope Francis are contrary to church tradition, Roche warned that, quote, we've got to be very careful because the church passes on the tradition, and it's the church that makes the tradition. It's not people in lobbies that create tradition. Now, this of course is again, what does he mean by that? Are traditional Catholics lobbyists simply by continuing Catholic tradition? And if we're lobbyists, what are we lobbyists for?
Well, you know, when I, like you, when I saw those, and it makes me shrug my shoulders because it's not like that's the first time we've read these types of exchanges between someone in the Curia and the press. It's been coming for a long time. They're saying a lot of stuff publicly now because they have to, because people are starting to notice, wait a minute, I thought we were going to be able to keep, you know, kind of like it reminds me here a few years ago when we started our government insurance program, and everyone was sold this bit of goods, and that's what everyone said. Wait a minute, I thought I could keep my doctor, but it was too late by that point. By that time, the law had been pushed through. We're still not out of it. We still can't get out of what we call here Obamacare. Okay. With this, what I hear Cardinal Roche saying, what I hear Pope Francis saying, superficially, I don't see anything untrue. Okay, and superficially, it's when you go in deep. Okay, now, yes, does the church make tradition? Well, of course she does. Do the people in the pews make the tradition? No, they don't. They never have. Okay, however, they're also, by using those same things, he's making those arguments that we've been making. That not just we've made, but that are those people, the men who've come before us have been making. So once again, all they're doing is stealing everything that has been and redefining it for themselves, and that's it. That's the smell I get off him, Cardinal Roche, is I just told you how it is. That's it.
I mean,
move.
Yeah, because well, that's it. I mean, I would, as you say, superficially, it sounds okay, but knowing where they come from and what their position is, and what their thinking is. It is wrong, of course, because the church doesn't make tradition in the sense that the church preserves and continues tradition. Now he means the church as an institution can say what is tradition and what isn't. And to some extent that's true, but only when what the church says is consistent with pre-existing tradition, with perennial tradition. And this is the whole debate about the Novus Ordo Missae and everything else, is that what they are trying to say. I mean, it's actually Pope Francis is actually echoing Blessed Pius IX, who anecdotally was said that a cardinal asked him before the First Vatican Council or during it, but Holy Father, what about tradition? And Pius IX said, tradition, I am tradition. But now Francis is with Roche, is trying to say the same thing, trying to say tradition is whatever I determine what tradition is. But more than that, of course, actually what they're also trying to do is, or Pope Francis is claiming, I am the faith. He's trying to say, whatever I determine to be the faith is the Catholic faith. And that's what Roche is saying when he says, people have got to be careful and consider whether they're Catholics or Protestants.
Yeah. We've asked people to consider that question as well.
Yeah, and because he's saying, in other words, it's this hyper papolatry again, where he's saying, well, if you disagree with the Pope, then you're not a Catholic, which is absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And it is this hyper papolatry, this hyper papolatry, hyper papalism that is crushing the church, and arguably has been the most crushing phenomena of the modern papacy, and people with this skewed idea from Pastor Eternus that whatever the Pope says, it goes. And yet, that is not the tradition of the church. That is not the perennial magisterium of the church. And that's not the way that holy obedience works. So for Francis and for Roche to say that, tradition is whatever we say tradition is, and for Francis to suggest that, the faith is whatever I say the faith is, this is un-Catholic.
Well, I find it interesting because I think it's important for people to, read what's going on. You're trying to help everyone understand what they're really saying, what they're really laying forth for us to believe, because that's what they're trying to do. I find it interesting because you may know that here in this country, we also had, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was the face of sort of the COVID crisis for our country and therefore for much of the world, who said, I am science, when many of us are questioning that. And so he comes back with the same thing. I am science. So what the Centers for Disease Control say is what science is. And so then we have Rome saying what Rome says, it is what we are. So the very thing that they warn us about, meaning that in 100 years, then what's Rome going to say? Because, what's the great confusion for those of us who are students of the church is to look and say, well, it's never, up until modernity, it's never really been a question of whether the Pope is Catholic. He didn't have to question what was coming out of what encyclicals he was writing. That you pretty much knew what was going to happen, what he's going to say, what the Catholics were going to say, and this was for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. except for, our own disagreements between churches. That's pretty much the way the world has seen our point of view until modernism, or maybe I could say our response to the Enlightenment. Again, Rome, the church saying, oh my gosh, the world's going, how do we respond to everyone saying you're not giving us what we want? And they did. They responded with modernity, and we've been paying for it ever since. So that's where I come back, Excellency, to you, as I say, well, that's where I come back to that question, because how do you not get wrapped up in the continual arguments of trying to convince someone of the actual truth? And I want to give you an example. And I use his name with pardon. I don't mean to do this, but everyone knows him. If you follow Dr. Peter Kwasniewski at all, okay, I encourage you to go and read just the past month, anything, Facebook, texts, any post that he's given, because he's basically doing pirouettes. Now, he's explaining himself, which I really appreciate, because he's a scholar, and he's, like recently he was explaining a particular argument, and he says, a few years ago I said this is what I meant at that time. I'm realizing now, from what I'm seeing now, what I should have said, and I'm sorry. Here's what is really happening. Okay, he's not there. He's not to the point of saying he has to go somewhere else for the Latin Mass yet, because he doesn't have to. He's got a FSSP chapel that he goes to yet. But like the Excellency was pointing out at the beginning of the show, people are starting to notice. Many are coming back this weekend, and they're not, their Latin Mass, or they're either finding out it's their last weekend or it's gone. FSSP parishes are existing for now, but only because they're protected by Pope Francis, believe it or not, for now. For now. But that could disappear again. There could be a letter on their door next week. And then what do you do? And that's why I think it's what, if I could plug also my last video, The Pope of Woke, because it's in there. The details of all this is in there, in that they intend to herd us into these small chapels to make it disappear. Because just like that big family that you spoke of, they're not going to go. I know that small chapel. I happen to know that beautiful small chapel that he speaks of outside of Washington, D.C. I used to love going there. But you can only fit about 50 people sitting really close together in there. Most people sit comfortably because only about 20 go. But a family like that comes, they see one time, and that's it. Because they take up half the chapel, even though there's only 10 of them, maybe, in their whole party. But there's noise, there's snacks, there's food, there's the baby going from here to there, there's the cry room. It's a parish. You can't have a parish in a little chapel in the country. Okay, so eventually the people just won't go anymore. They'll go to the Novus Ordo parish. And like the world with truth, it's going to happen with so many of the people who were, I hate to say it, but they were simply going to Latin Mass every week. They didn't know a lot of the history. They didn't know a lot of what's going on. They just knew it touched their hearts. They knew it spoke to them. They knew that was the place to be, where they could find the truth. And now they're going to show up like many of my relatives, and the church is saying, go there. And they're going to say, well, Father says that's all we have, so that's where I go. And after a few weeks, most of them are not going to go seek out a Latin Mass. They're just going to stay there because they have their lives. They have lives, they have families, they have things going on, and they don't have time to drive an hour there and an hour back, or 2 hours, and then gas money, and then, everything, or a bus fare, if you can get a bus out to the country, all those things come into play. So it's intentional. And so that's when I come back to, okay, so then what is our job as Old Romans? in all of that, because I think that there's a trick in this, and you get wrapped up in explaining and arguing and fighting and petitioning. And I mean, those can be all good and well, I suppose. I just don't know if that's my role, or if you would say that's our role. You know,
well, I mean, I would say that, and Bishop Kelly now is waiting in the wings. So I'll just say this quickly, but I would say that in many ways it's not our role to have to continue to explain everything, and I say that because there are enough resources. There's enough apologetic material that's very good, that has been developed and published and made known over the last 50 years, that's still relevant, still pertinent. And of course it is, because it's speaking about something that is consistent, meaning tradition. So, on the Old Roman, as you know, and for those who don't, www.theoldroman.com, we publish there various apologetic materials, some our own, some from the SSPX, some from the SSPV. So, anywhere that makes the case for Catholic tradition coherently and comprehensively and correctly. All that stuff is out there. What I would say, really primarily our role as Old Romans, is what it has ever been, and why we're still here, is to continue to preserve and to maintain the traditional Catholic faith, so that it is available. Now, I suspect, and perhaps you do, maybe that's what you're hinting at, there is, our time perhaps is coming. Perhaps the reason why Old Romans have persisted till now is for this moment in the church's life. Perhaps now, as you say, people may, and I think you have a fair appreciation of the general mindset of most people, but there are those who are searching and looking for tradition, who realize that what they're getting from the mainstream institution is not the whole thing. There are those who, only this week, for example, we have on Thursdays an open catechism session, and a young man turned up there who wants to convert from his childhood Judaism to become a traditional Catholic, and we were able to answer various questions then. I'm going to meet up with him next week and have a conversation. Now, the sad thing is that he's not local. He's a visitor. We're attracting visitors here. We've had visitors to the Mass. We've had now visitors to catechism, and young men. Actually, all of them have been so far young men who realize that things in the church are not quite right, and who want to know what the truth is, who want to know where the faith is, who want to know where tradition is being lived. And I think that's the key thing, that for us as Old Romans, and for the faithful that do come to our missions and masses, is to live the faith, to live a traditional Catholic faith, which is and ought to be counter to the prevailing culture, but also to be counter even toward the culture in the current mainstream. But perhaps we'll talk more about that with Bishop Kelly, who I shall bring on now. Oh, nope. You might need to in our Dallas mode.
No, yeah. I apologize for my tardiness, but this is smack dab in middle of one day I had to do stuff, so I had to do the weekly shop and for groceries and pick up dry cleaning, and so I apologize for my tardiness.
Oh, that's all right.
But
Now there's a little problem with your volume.
oh,
I don't know if you.
well, I can roar like Ian Pearson.
Oh yes,
Well.
yeah. Speak up, because I've maxed your mic, and you're still quite faint. So
I can certainly speak to certain differences between the Roman Church and the Pre-Presbyterians. I will speak up. I was listening to what you were speaking about, and there's been a lot going on. I mean, were you alluding to the Shia LaBeouf thing? Was that what?
no. Except that there is a recent development on the Shia LaBeouf angle, which is that Cardinal Roche has said that he would welcome a conversation with Shia about Shia's comments to Bishop Barron about the traditional Latin Mass, and the Cardinal would like to know why, what moved him about the traditional Latin Mass, and see if see if he can persuade him to, or suggest to him that he will find the same thing with a decent Novus Ordo Missae. But other than that, we were talking really about Francis and he's gone. I thought he froze. He's gone. But for those of you who have just joined us, that's what we're talking about. The comments and the thinking behind Francis and Cardinal Roche's definition of tradition, and in their recent pronouncements. So going back to the raison d'être of Old Romans. I mean, all our clergy, all our sacred ministers are desirous to serve, and one of the things, part of the point of this program, and of course of this channel and of the website, is to make known where Old Romans are, so that the faithful can find them. And if you go to theoldroman.com, you can find their TLM directories. And we include there even the diocesan TLMs, although I'm going to have to do some major editing on that, because a lot of those will have gone this weekend. But advertised there are Old Roman missions and masses, as well as SSPV, SSPX, FSSP, ICSIP, and all the others. But obviously that's I just realized that's some editing that I'm going to have to do now. But for us as Old Romans, is perhaps now, as I say, perhaps now we will come into our own. But what our own is, I would say, is what has always been the mission of the Church, and that is the conversion and the salvation of souls. The difference is now that conversion work is not limited to just those who haven't been baptized, but equally now includes those who have been baptized. Because I would say that part of our remit must now be, together with other traditional Catholic societies, to reconvert our Catholic brothers and sisters in the mainstream, who I mean, only the other day, I noticed that last week, but it was just before the show and I hadn't seen it. There was a new Pew Research survey with even more disastrous statistics, and I read another this week where where 15 in Holland, 15% of nominal Catholics are atheists.
Just
I mean, there is, real work to do in the conversion of the world. Which is the purpose, the whole purpose of the church, is conversion. And whereas before, perhaps as Old Romans, we have looked to convert those on the fringe, I think now the field is wide open, and if we can, because at the end of the day, this whole business is about the salvation of souls. The reason why we exist, and the reason why others are resisting the contemporary zeitgeist in the church, is for the sake of souls. Is because we believe that these matters are matters of salvation. It matters which mass is offered. It matters how the mass is offered. It matters what the doctrines are in the church. It matters. All these things matter because the salvation of souls matters. And we know, again, because we know from the statistics, that the church is not saving souls as once she did. And it's, foolish are they who try to suggest that that's got nothing to do with Vatican II. It's got everything to do. Well, actually, if not directly with Vatican II, it's got everything to do with the so-called implementation of Vatican II and the spirit, so-called, of Vatican II from the 70s onwards.
Archbishop Lefebvre is often just sort of summed up as about his approach to the traditional liturgy, but that wasn't his main beef with the council. His main beef with the council was with ecumenism. And when you have ecumenism, that there were several paths to God, and everyone could get there. That was his main problem with it. So, and I think that's of the highest importance. It's there are no one comes to the Father except through me. That's the words of Jesus Christ. No one comes to the Father except through me. So unless you accept our Lord and you're baptized and you live a Christian life, then you can reach the Father. And if you read the Gospel of St. John, where our Lord talks about knowing the Father, the only gateway to him is through the Logos, is through our Lord, and it's a wonderful experience. I once did a retreat with a preacher, a traditional, if you can imagine that they existed. God love him, he's probably dead now, but a traditional Redemptorist gave the whole retreat on knowing the Father through the Logos, and it was very traditional. But it was life-changing for me, because you could only experience God through the incarnational, salvific nature of the Logos of our Lord. So, to pretend that these things exist in everyone, that there's different paths and all this sort of stuff, it's a lie, and it's a pernicious lie, because it leads people down the wrong path. And Lefebvre speaks about that. I mean, you just Google it on YouTube. Or can you Google on YouTube? Just look it up on YouTube. But you'll find out what he says about it. And remember, Lefebvre was primarily a missionary in Africa. And when the whole ecumenism thing goes, he's like, well, what's the point?
That's right.
What's the point of me bringing Christ to people? Because the council has said it's okay if you do this, you do that, and there's all different ways. He speaks quite eloquently on that, more eloquently actually than he speaks on the mass. But it's quite interesting. I apologize for this view because my internet suddenly cut out, and I have to use my data on my phone and so I look like a washed out something or other.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah.
But go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were alone or was Excellency listening, but I was going to make a joke. I said, "Oh, well, he's always listening. He's always right there." Yeah, I of course I agree with all of that. I think it's important that people, both of you have said things that have addressed this to me. Have addressed this issue of, in the sense, who are we in this? The church doesn't know, and I think we agree that the Vatican Church does not know who she is. Many of the prelates, because they're part of the Vatican Church, they don't know who they are. And so we kind of look at ourselves, at least I do, and think, well, do we know who we are? And I kind of look behind, and that's why I go back to that. Well, when you find that there aren't a lot of us, and as I was reflecting on that, and I was reflecting like what Archbishop Jerome was saying earlier, was that our mission is simply what the church's mission has always been. Maybe we're the only ones that are doing it precisely this way, because despite that we don't have a problem with taking the many, many, many good things from the SSPX or the SSPV or the IX, or they each have their own little problems. There's a problem with them. There's a problem with their development, okay, which we can kind of look back and say, well, we don't have that problem. And but there's a reason why. It's not because we're not an outgrowth of anything, and people can go to our website and discover more about that. But the reason why I said that, because as I'm reflecting more, and as I'm let's see, where are we? September 3rd. As I'm just a little over 3 weeks away from my own ordination, and I'm thinking about, what am I looking for? What am I going to do? And I think, are there conversions? Are people getting saved during the Middle Ages, when there were no lights, when people thought the whole world was coming to an end? My point is that, especially in our modern age, if there was no internet, if there were no electricity, no churches open, would people understand? Yeah, would people understand, or would we understand? Are souls still going to get saved if everything is taken away? Only, of course, yes, but we can still do what we're called to do. We still get up, we still have our breviary, still say Holy Mass, you still do those things. In other words, what we do perpetuates no matter what. And that's precisely what our mission is. And so I thought about that. I thought, we're really then, like Excellency Archbishop Jerome, how many years have you had that small community going there where you are?
So we started here in 2008.
Okay, many years, but I bet if we could sit across from each other, I could say, how much would you like to do? Oh, you go, oh my gosh, are you kidding? There's still this and this and this and this and this. But yet he's so many years ahead of what we're doing here in Detroit. And I can look over at Bishop Kelly and say, tell me about Chicago. And he may have before him a longer history of what was going on even before him in Chicago. And so there's years and years there. Okay, but I could ask him the same thing. Now, what does Chicago need? And he would say the same thing. Oh, this and this and this. And so my point is, like here in Detroit, I think we begin with, at the very, very nothingness basics. So what do we look for? Tomorrow. just like the church has always looked for. Well, the next prayers, what are the next prayers for the day? What's the next mass? And that's where we go until at least, we open our eyes and we're in front of our Lord. And in that way, that's our job. That's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. And I hope I'm not stepping on your toes, Excellency, because that's what Archbishop Jerome said. What are people looking for? They're looking for a lived tradition, not a book tradition, not necessarily. That comes later. But they want to go and see. And isn't that what our Lord said when people would ask him? Come and see. Come and see. And that's what I want to be able to say. At least, now if someone says to me, I want to say, come and see. And so what do we have to have? Firstly, in ourselves. And that's very much what I point out in that last video, that no matter what, whether the world's ending or the church is ending, doesn't matter. You have to be ready. We have to be ready. I have to be ready. And so those four last things that the church used to talk about all the time, death, judgment, heaven, hell, that we should all be talking about those all the time, not because they're morbid, but because that's what matters. That's what we're preparing for. And that's where we should be going.
But it really is, as you rightly say, it's a missionary project. But remember, if you're not welcome there, wipe the dust off your sandals and move on. Not that they're not worthy, but I mean, you can only go so far as to try to tell people and evangelize people. And if you meet a barrier that is so insurmountable, then you do have to dust off your sandals and walk on. And that's not on you or on me as a missionary, but it's on them because they're unwilling to hear. You preach the message. You've given them the God spiel, but they're not willing to hear. So, I mean, you can try, and I think after the third attempt, you just got to, unfortunately, move on. Doesn't mean you can't revisit. But
I don't know. The first thing that pops into my mind when I hear things like that, because it's true. I mean, but I think of St. Anthony, who was out there preaching, and he got so angry because then no one would listen to him. I'll go preach to the fishes. And so he goes to the cliff, and the famous, he's preaching, and the fish start to jump up and down because he's preaching to them. And I feel that way sometimes. I'll preach to the grass. I don't, because you'll get picked up. If you do that. But you do feel that way sometimes. But as a Roman Catholic, I know, and God willing, soon to be a Roman Catholic priest, I know what's important for the people of Detroit is the perpetuation of Holy Mass, of the true Mass. That's here. They may not be coming, but that doesn't matter. All of heaven is present when that happens, truly, properly, wherever it happens.
Yeah, I mean, and like I say, I think people will start to come, and I think as Francis cracks down harder, as the Latin Mass leaves the parishes, because remember, in Traditionis Custodes, no permission is granted for the traditional Latin Mass to be offered in parish churches anymore. As it disappears, not all, certainly, but I think a good few of those who were regular attenders of TLMs will start to look around. And won't be as fussy as perhaps they once were as to where they go and find the TLM, because people are realizing, the people who care are realizing that actually, what's at stake here is the truth and the true faith, And I remember I'm always put in mind of the apostles coming to our Lord and saying, there are these other guys that are casting out devils in your name, and our Lord says, yeah, and what about it? If if they're casting them out in my name, well and good. And likewise with the traditional Latin Mass, whether it's Old Roman, whether it's SSPX, whether it's SSBV, whether it's CMRI, if it's the traditional Latin Mass, and that the doctrine, the catechesis, if you know that the faith is there, if you can be certain that whoever is offering the Mass has the right intention, can formulate the right intention, that's all that matters, because that's what brings the possibility of communion with God. That's all that matters.
Sorry. Well, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to say that what Brother says. Ireland under penal times, where priests were banned, where the Mass was banned, Catholicism was banned. They met at Mass rocks that had a sort of a flat table that you could possibly say, and priests were shot on sight. There's a famous place in Belfast, actually, which would have been the outskirts of Belfast at the time, but there was a Mass rock, and the redcoats saw this Franciscan friar saying Mass, and they shot him, and the precious blood was spilled on it, and it is now an ancient Catholic graveyard. But I mean, when the Mass is said, no matter how many people come to it, no matter how underground it is, when the Mass is said, as you rightly said, heaven and all of the saints are with it. And it's very important that the true Mass is said. I don't care what Father Flager's doing down there with his light shows, or what sort of carry-ons going on across the whole place. But I know when I say Mass, and it's a very humbling experience, when I say Mass, I'm joined with the saints, and I am not worthy to be joined with them. But all of heaven rejoices. All the angels and saints rejoice. I mean, when you say the Sanctus and you enter into the canon of the Mass, it's an incredibly humbling experience. I mean, it really, I mean, it guts me sometimes to think that, what right have I to be here? But the right I have to be here is that I'm supplying it for those who don't. And as much as I do that, it's reflecting on the community that I live in. Because as Catholics, we're not individualists. We live in communities. We live in family units. We live in parishes. We live in counties. And we're communal people. So it's incredibly important, however humble it may be. And it was, remember at the very beginning, the persecution of the Christians, it was incredibly humble. I mean, they had to, it was in secret, you know. But it's very important that it exists. And where it exists, heaven touches earth, and that makes a big difference. That makes a change. That is incarnational, as they like the buzzword these days. But it is truly incarnational, because Christ is made present during the Holy Mass. And it's important that we do it. And however, however tired you are, however difficult it is, it's just it has to be done, you know. And I think we as all Romans do that, and we have done that. Um, you know, the prayer of Matthew, Archbishop Matthew, is a wonderful prayer. We pray it after Mass. You know, about the lost souls that are not of this fold, them also I must bring. And it's ultimately a prayer of unity. But unity is not perfect. It's certainly not today, because of the confusion that has been brought by certainly the Second Vatican Council and the spirit of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, in many ways, I see our ministry and our mission as Old Romans as very akin to that of the early church, as the apostles. You know, we're not rich. We're not rich in legacies. We're not rich in assets. Everything that we have, we earn ourselves, or sometimes is donated. You know, yeah, we have few chapels. We have few churches, but we don't need all of that necessarily. As long as we can erect an altar, we can offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass. What matters is that you know, we continue in the apostolic tradition, we continue in the apostolic succession, we continue with the traditional liturgy and the doctrine. But I think, you know, one of the differences, I know Brother Stanislaus, you asked last week or the week before, you know, about the differences between us and other traditionalist groups, and is that we are the poorer brother. I mean, ironically, if anyone smells of the sheep, it's Old Roman clergy, because you know, despite the fact that we, you know, clearly make a point of wearing cassocks and you know, everything that goes with tradition, these things aren't provided for us. These things we have to provide for ourselves. Everything we have to provide for ourselves. You know, when you see even you know, some of you may have seen the ordinations in Slovakia 6 months ago, where we were using a disused church. And we had to fill that ourselves with crucifixes, candles, relics, altar cloths, frontals, chairs, everything. And that's true of all our missions and chapels. We have to provide it all ourselves. We don't have the comfort of being able to walk into just any church or chapel and use it and assume that everything that is necessary for tradition is there. You know, our clergy have to support themselves, but not only support themselves, they also have to support their own ministry, and that includes having to provide for themselves vestments, sacristy supplies, altar linen, candles, crosses, altars, etc. And in this, we are very much a missionary apostolate, a missionary society, a missionary ministry. And
But there's an incredible richness in that, in a sense, that because it does not breed complacency. When you have the marble altars, the basilicas, and all of that, it breeds complacency. We don't have that. We have to strive for it, and therefore we don't have that folly of complacency. Uh, what we do is because what we do, and it causes us somewhat of pain because you've got to pay out of pocket. Not that it's the end of the world, but you do it for the love of it. And you just can't walk into, St. John Lateran's and, have a high pontifical mass. But what we do is because of the love of the mass and the importance of providing the sacraments. And I think
it's sacrifice, isn't it? It's sacrifice.
It's sacrifice, and to us as priests, and I think to those who attend, it makes it more poignant, because in a sense it's humble. It's the Poverellos of the Franciscan movement. It's St. Francis always insisted. He wore sackcloth and a robe. But he always insisted that the altar linens had to be perfect, because it was the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And it's kind of what we do. That's what we do. And I think in some way, that shines through to people. They can see that the sincerity is there, whereas you can go lots of other places and you will experience insincerity like you've never experienced before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of Bishop Yoash in the Philippines, who has literally a small room with a bed in it at the back of the church, next to the sacristy, and bathroom and kitchen. But he's there, at the back of the church. That's where he lives. So he's not in some great residence or some great rectory, or anything else. And the community, they built that chapel, and they maintain that chapel, and all of them, live and give sacrificially, and all for the sake of having the faith, for the sake of having the true Mass, the true sacraments, and to live and strive to live a true life in Christ, for God. And likewise, I think, Deacon Adam in Slovakia, he lives with his mother. They've sacrificed a room in their flat for a chapel. All of the accoutrements, all the vestments, everything necessary for the ordinations in September. This is all being supplied by Deacon Adam, who has, earned as an IT worker and as a psychologist, and spends his earnings on yes, him and his mother and their upkeep, but then sacrificially for all the things necessary for ministry. And ultimately for a dignified offering of the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and what he can't buy, he sows. He's taught himself to sew and to use a sewing machine, and he will wait and save up and buy the right damask, and the right materials necessary for vestments, so that everything is the best that can be offered sacrificially for the holy sacrifice. And this is a story repeated amongst all our brethren, amongst all our sacred ministers as Old Romans, and that's and but together with that is a very ordinary, normal, living experience that is realized often bivocationally, meaning that some are secularly employed in order to earn money. Others, perhaps in occupations more lending themselves more or better to sacred ministry, like hospital chaplaincy, or the music therapy that I do, or as well as the generosity of those few benefactors and faithful who are able to give. And explaining this to talking recently to a couple of vocation discernment chaps, and it's interesting how people now, because of the present situation, the crisis bites deeper in the church. How people are beginning to realize that this again is what's going to be necessary. Do you remember a few months ago we were saying, the legacy of the parish churches that were built by the ethnic communities in the turn of the last century, where they gave a penny a week or a dollar a month or whatever they could afford. We're coming to that kind of situation again, where all of us, it's all of us, the sacred ministers and the faithful together as a community in Christ, should all be living sacrificially for the sake and for the preservation and the maintenance of the faith, and of the true mass.
Yeah, no, speaking as a hospital chaplain during the lockdown, where during COVID, where all the churches were closed in Chicago, all of them, the hospital chapel was open, and I went in. Normally, I don't work on Sundays at the hospital, but I went in and offered Mass every Sunday at the hospital. And nurses and doctors would come in on their day off in order to get the Mass. And it's not a very big chapel, but I had people out in the corridor outside in order to get the Mass. It was apart from the SSPX, which is one chapel, I think I was the only one open, and they came, and it was, the traditional Mass, because they were starved of it. That's what we do as Old Romans. That's what we do as missionary Old Romans. It's like we provide this service, and people really appreciate it. It's something, well, just like the early apostles, where Christians were persecuted, but when St. Paul came to the various cities in the Mediterranean, he was appreciated. Sometimes he wasn't, but others appreciated him because he had a message, and he wasn't going to give up. And I think that's very key to the whole thing, I mean, I wish I could have opened the whole thing up to the public, but you had to be staffed to get in because we were on lockdown. But it was phenomenal. I was shocked the amount of people, staff members, who on their day off would come in because it's the only place they could get the Holy Mass.
Yeah. But I think there is
for 99.9% of them, it wasn't the Mass they were used to, but it was still the Mass.
Yeah. Father Vatican.
Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Go on, finish.
No, I was just going to say, none of them batted an eyelid, even though the Mass was the traditional Latin Mass, and they just accepted it, and they all, they came to communion. Some of them came first of all and would ask for confession before Mass, but I would say the vast majority never went to a Latin Mass before, but none of them batted an eyelid. It was the Mass was the Mass was the Mass, so You're going to say about Ratzinger.
Well, yes, I was just going to say, there's a famous quote by Ratzinger during the council where he prophesies about a remnant church, and I've always recognised us, as old Romans, as being that, where he says a church that is stripped of all its riches, of all its societal prestige, of all its privileges and advantages, etc., but a church that will become again like the Church of the Catacombs, and that's exactly what we as old Romans are. And at one time, we did have churches and things, but through the machinations of men and time, they've disappeared. But we're still here. And perseverance is one of the bywords, I would say, of an old Roman vocation. That we carry on despite the odds, but we do so because we do so for the love of God. Our ministries are truly sacrificial. Our lives are lived sacrificially for the sake of the true faith and the true mass.
And not only did Ratzinger say that at the council, he repeated it when he was pope. That it's kind of a foreboding thing, because, the modern Catholic Church is unrecognizable. The apostles wouldn't recognize it. When you see the Pachimamas being paraded into St. Peter's Basilica, when you see Father Flega's light shows down in St. Sabina, the apostles wouldn't recognize that as Christianity whatsoever.
Half the popes of the previous century wouldn't recognize
not
the
at
church.
all. Not at all.
If Pius XII or Pius XI or Pius X walked into an average Roman parish church today, they'd think they'd walked into a Protestant chapel.
Yeah, they'd pass out.
They'd be wondering, well, where are the stations? Where are the statues? Where are the icons? Where's the altar?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Where's the Blessed Sacrament? Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, but it's not all lost. We will rebuild. We can get back, we're not left orphaned. Christ is with us, and it's that I think we have to remember. As much as we despair or roll our eyes and get frustrated.
Oh.
No. That is gone. Okay. Well, that's perhaps rather fortuitous, because I think we've about reached our time again this week. Brother, was there anything, last few thoughts at all?
No, I was listening to you both. I think, of course, you're both right. I agree. I guess, what I had come up with was just that, precisely that, what my goal is here is to get this missionary chapel up and going, more so than we are now. And God willing, that when it comes my time, that there's someone here that can continue as I did. And so maybe we are looking to that. Maybe it'll be like, it reminds me of St. John Vianney, the famous story of, that's how they used to do it. You have the apprentice that would show up at the door. And if he stuck around and worked out and could do everything, then you continue that on and on and on for the years until eventually the kid got ordained. And that's the way it used to be. And maybe that's where we're going back to as well.
Oh, I think so. It would be lovely to have a seminary. But for the time being, I would say to any serious-minded young man with who could only perhaps conceive of a conventional path to ordination, I would say go to the SSPX. I have no problem with the FSSP seminary or the ICSIP seminaries, except that I would say how much longer they're going to be available for, who knows? But there is actually more solidity in the SSPX seminaries, certainly for the cause and sake of tradition and the traditional formation, than in those who rely upon Rome. But I can certainly see that for ourselves, a return to a pre-Trent type of formation may be necessary. And I can't overemphasize enough the sacrificial nature of our ministry for those who may be interested, who in pursuing and discerning a vocation with us. That ours is, I would say, the most sacrificial route to ordination that anyone can take. It's very easy to go from college or university straight into a seminary and have everything laid on for you, have ready meals, everything prepared, everything cozy, everything, nice chapel set up, and all the rest of it. But for the vast majority of traditional Catholics and vocations going forward, that is going to become a rarity, and instead a more radical, countercultural pursuit of vocation is going to have to be realized, and that may mean putting oneself through college for a theology degree. That may mean having to earn a living as well as pursue and realize a vocation. In all, and may mean, one of my hopes would be to found formation houses where young men pursuing a vocation could live together and share a house, and between them cover the costs with temporary jobs or grants or funds or whatever, but and have formation houses near where our bishops are, so that they can receive instruction and formation. And those might be those may grow into themselves seminaries later on, who knows? But it all depends, it all relies on all of us as traditional Catholics becoming ourselves more evangelical in our approach to the fulfillment of the Church's mission to save souls. We all of us, not just the sacred ministers, not just the religious, we've all of us got to talk conversion. We've got to, yes, focus truly on our own conversion, obviously, but also that we may be a model of conversion for souls. And it's no good anymore thinking, well, my family's nominally Catholic, they still get their kids baptized at the Novus Ordo Church, so that's okay. That sort of attitude and that sort of apathy is not good enough, because the stakes are high. The stakes really are about salvation. The stakes really are about death, judgment, and hell or heaven. And we have to think, we have to develop an attitude that clearly the early Catholic Christians had in the first centuries of the Church's existence, where they had such a love for God, such a zeal for the love of Jesus, and an appreciation for it. That it was all they could do to bring others to know Jesus, and of course to know him in the sacrament, to recognize him in the sacrament, and to be able to receive the Holy Communion and realize communion with God. And this in the pursuit of holy lives. Now, the church began with 12 humble men and grew to what it was by 1962. So all things are possible with God. We just have to have faith. We just have to keep the faith, preserve the faith, maintain the faith, and continue the faith. And that means conversions. Bishop Kelly, would you be kind enough to, or are there any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you're going to ask me for a blessing, but just before the blessing, I would remind people that every day you wake up is a conversion. You have to conventare, to turn towards God. And if you make that a purpose in your life, when you begin each day turning towards God, to convert yourself towards God, you will gain many riches and graces. So I would encourage that. But I will impart God's blessing. Sit nomen Domini benedictum.
Ex hoc nunc ut usque in saecula,
Auditorium nostrum nomini Domini.
qui feci caelum et terram.
Benedicat vos omnipotens, Patris, Filius, et Spiritus Sanctus. Descendat super vos et maniat semper. Amen.
Amen. Well, bless you all as always for watching, and great comments in the YouTube live chat there.
Good.
Yeah, nice to see people making acquaintances, getting to know each other. For as much as it's true what Brother Stanislaus was saying at the top of the program about the diaspora of Old Roman clergy, but the same is true, of course, from all traditional Catholics, for most traditional Catholics. Many are not blessed to have a local SSPX chapel or an Old Roman chapel or an SSPV or any other traditional chapel near them, but nonetheless are striving to retain and maintain the faith. It is the hope and the purpose of the oldroman.com to provide a source of encouragement as well as of news and devotional aids for all Old Romans and traditional Catholics anywhere and everywhere to preserve, maintain and continue living tradition, living the faith. So please do check out www.theoldroman.com. Please do continue to support this channel on YouTube. Now, speaking of which, we are a few hundred away from 1,000 channel subscribers. Now, if we get to 1,000 channel subscribers for our YouTube channel, that's a game changer. Because suddenly all sorts of incredible things we will be able to do with this channel in terms of integrating it into all our other social media platforms. So please, if you haven't already yourself, subscribe to this channel. Please encourage others to subscribe to this channel. Let's see if let's see if by Christmas we could have achieved that target and reached our goal of 1,000 YouTube subscribers. We're about 920 odd at the moment, so just a few more hundred, and then we can do all sorts of other interesting things with the platform. So do encourage others to like and share these videos, and look out for new content as it's coming. There is new content coming. I know I keep saying this every week, but bear in mind that there isn't a big production team behind me. I have to do it on top of everything else that I have to do. So bear with, but there are things in the pipeline that will be coming soon. Part of the issue, part of the thing is that I'm trying to do more in terms of production videos rather than live broadcasts. So as you know, we were churning out a lot of content over the 2 years of the pandemic. And that I was able to do because I wasn't able to do various other things, but all that stuff was live. And what I'd like to do now is really try to produce videos, which entails recording and editing and all that kind of thing. But in order to, give a more sort of professional presentation to our apologetics and to our content. So do bear with, because that just means it all takes a little longer to do all that stuff. But we're having a go. So thank you for being faithful. Keep being faithful. And it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from them.
And we'll see you next week. All being
yes, next week. Yes, I should be there.
Excellent. Super. God bless everyone. Take care.
Bye for now.
Oh, and don't forget, we do rely on donations. And we had a wonderful response, an initial response to ordination fund donations last Saturday. The ordinations are coming up at the end of September in Slovakia and in Detroit, in America. If you would like to contribute to either of those, please visit oldroman.com and you will find links there, PayPal links there, and you can give by credit card, bank transfer, whatever. But please do try to help us to defray some of the costs of what it takes to keep Old Romans and True Sacraments going. And, God willing, there'll be many more ordinations to come in the future. Thank you, and God bless.